Hi, Lalot Arcadio Rivera for Cat Nocturnal, and this video is a continuation of the rules on categorical syllogism, and we are now in the number 3 rule out of the 8 rules for categorical syllogism. So in the number 3 rule, it says that the middle term must not occur in the conclusion. So this is just very simple. In the previous rules, we have the first one, there must only be 3 terms, the middle term, the major term, and the minor term. Then, if that is violated, the result will be a fallacy of the fourth term. And the most common cause for the fallacy of fourth term is the fallacy of equivocation, which usually happens in the middle term. So it appears like the middle term is just one and the same, but actually it has an equivocation, or it has another meaning, or it is used in another signification in the other application or context. So the number 3 is you must not bring down the middle term to the conclusion. So in the example, we have Leo the 13th was a great salesman. Then Leo the 13th was small by stature. And again, immediately consider or determine if there is a middle term, and the middle term is the term that is that appears twice in the premises. So we have Leo the 13th. So if you have Leo the 13th there, the other terms are the major term, great sales statesman, and the minor term, small by stature. So supposed to be, as I have taught you earlier about how to construct the conclusion, the subject of the conclusion should come from the minor term. So it should be that which is small by stature is a great statesman. No, so that's supposed to be the structure of the conclusion. But here we have Leo the 13th was great and small. Now Leo the 13th is neither major premise nor major term nor minor term. It is the middle term. Now, as a rule, you don't bring down the middle term. Why? Because if you bring it down, it's going to create, it's not going to make a good conclusion at all. Not going to make a correct conclusion. And the reason why it is not correct, it's because the middle term in the premises has already been applied or being used. So it cannot be, it is of no use in the conclusion at all. And besides, it will be too crowded in the conclusion already. So that is now the explanation why there is such rule as that don't bring down the middle term to the conclusion. It should just stay up in the premises. So the terms Leo the 13th, which is middle term, great statesman, which is major term, small by stature, which is minor term, plus found in the conclusion, great and small, okay? Great and small, no? So you have here, you have another term, great statesman, small by stature, and here it has become great and small. So there are so many terms already. So it will result to not just a fourth term, but a fallacy, no? A fallacy of the fourth term, or even worse than, or even something else. So this is the number 3 rule. Let's move to number 4. Number 4 says that the middle term must be used at least once as universal. In other words, you have to see to it that the middle term must be universal at least once. Why is that so? Let's read this. If we compare the major and the minor terms with two different parts of the middle term, so take note that when we do syllogism, we make comparison. We compare ideas, and we compare the idea A with that of B. Okay, but there is no connection between A and B unless you have a C, which is a middle term. So the middle term C should be compared to both A and B altogether. So if we compare major and minor terms with two different parts of the middle term, it remains doubtful now whether these two parts agree among themselves. Okay? So we are not sure if A and B really agree together. If A agrees with C and C agrees with B. Okay? So do they agree among themselves? Consequently, it is uncertain whether the extremes agree among themselves. When, however, one extreme agrees with a part of its extension, the comparison is possible because what is true of the universal is true of the particular included therein. So the point of the rule is that if you are going to at least achieve a comparison that is universally applied or used, then it results to a better comparison compared to a comparison that is applied only particularly. So let's go to the example. All queens are women. All maids are women. The middle term is women, okay, here. And that is figure 2 because it's at the right, the middle term is arranged at the right side from our viewing point. Then the major term is queens, the minor term is maids. So the conclusion, all maids are queens. Okay? So what is wrong with this syllogism? Take note that in the number 2 rule, you have to consider the number of terms or the quantity of terms. Women here, okay, women as the middle term. Let us see if they are particular in the second rule. The second rule involves major term and minor term. If the major term or minor term and or both are particular in the premises, then they should also be particular in the conclusion. But here, our major term, queens, is universal, so it doesn't matter. No, it's not part of the rule that to consider this universal major term. So it doesn't affect the consistency of the syllogism if the major term is universal. So the rule says that only when it is particular. So even if here this is particular, it doesn't matter. So no violation. Then the minor term is universal also, so it doesn't matter. We are only told to determine if the major or minor terms are particular, okay, in the premises, because if so, then it should be particular in the conclusion. But in the number 4 rule, the emphasis is the middle term. The middle term should be universal at least once. Okay, so it appears twice. So at least once it should be universal. So let's find out. Here, women, the term women is particular because this comes from an affirmative proposition. In the second, it should be universal so that we can be compliant to the number 4 rule that the middle term must be used at least once as universal. But still, it is particular. So the middle term is both used particularly in the particular instance in both instances. So there is not sufficient sufficient basis now for the that the result of the comparison would be based on sufficient cause. So that will make the syllogism invalid. Okay, so next we have number 5. Okay, notice that, let's go back. Okay, number 1, there must be only 3 terms, so you just count. Okay, make sure that you have 3 terms and make sure that there is no equivocation. Then the second one is about major and minor terms. If they are particular in the premises, so they should be particular in the conclusion. So that's the focus for the number 2. Okay, major and minor terms as particular, if they are particular. Then in number 3, it's about the middle term, and also number 4, it's about middle term. So again, count if there are 3 terms. Next, check if the the major and the minor terms are particular, because they should also be particular in the conclusion. Then the next two others will focus on the middle term. Do not bring the middle term down to the conclusion anymore, and that the middle term should be used at least once as universal. So for number 5 and so on, not to number 8, this pertains to propositions. Okay, so number 5, it says that if both premises are affirmative, then the conclusion must also be affirmative, right? There is no reason, no logical, no sensible reason to that coming from two affirmative propositions, you end up with negative. Where does the negation come from? So out of the context. So it will cause fallacy in the syllogism. So the example here, good students work hard. Okay, then some Bisaya people are good students. Therefore, some Bisaya people work hard. Now, you do not say some Bisaya people do not work hard, although in itself it may be considered as true. Okay, but then in the syllogism, you cannot be emphasizing a negative thing out of two statements that are already stated affirmatively. So where does the negation come from? No, so that it does not make sense at all. Then number 6, okay, as I have said, starting with number 5, it's all about the propositions or the premises. So for number 6, if there are 2 negative premises, then nothing follows. Again, before that, it's about premises. If both are affirmative, okay, so conclusion must be affirmative. Then, if both are negative, nothing follows, okay? At least one must be affirmative. So, for example, we have no monkey can talk. Okay, no monkey can talk. Then, no dog is a monkey. Therefore, no dog can talk. With all these negations, so there is no predication that happens, no coherence at all, no? So so nothing follows. Now you cannot draw a conclusion from two negative propositions. Okay, then we have number 7. Okay, number 7 is if one premise is negative, then the conclusion must be negative, of course. No? So if there is a negation in the entire premises, you should bring it down to the conclusion. It should be the conclusion. You will know ahead that the conclusion must also be negative because one of the premises is negative. Then the other is if one of the premises is particular, then the conclusion must also be particular. So in the example, some students study well. Then all education girls are students. So middle term, students study well, major term, education, minor term. What will be your conclusion? So bring down the minor term to the subject of the conclusion. So all education girls, okay, bring this down, study well. Okay, now what is wrong with this? Okay, you have here one premise is particular. Okay, you have some here. So of course, when you find a quantifier sum in the premises, automatically you should know that the conclusion will begin with sum. And if you find negative in the premises, then you already automatically know that the correct conclusion will also be expressed in negation. In this example, the given has a particular premise, but the conclusion is universal. So that is a no-no. It is inconsistent. Then lastly, nothing follows from both particular premises. So again, if two premises start with the quantifier sum, then really nothing follows. Even if there is a conclusion, nothing follows. Why? Because if we rely on two instances alone of a particular application, that would not be sufficient reason for us to draw a particular conclusion or a certain conclusion. So again, if you hold particular instances, it will not be a reason for drawing a conclusion that is applicable to the universal. No, that will make the syllogism invalid. So again, let's go back. The number 1 rule, there must only be 3 terms. Then second rule will be on the major and the minor term. Then the next ones will be on the middle term. The middle term must be not appear in the conclusion, and the middle term must be used at least once as universal. The remaining, okay, will be about the premises. So the first is about the affirmative premises. If the premises are affirmative, therefore the conclusion should be affirmative. Then if the premises are negative, really nothing follows. It does not happen at all. Then number 7, if one is negative, one premise is negative, the conclusion is negative. If one premise is particular, then the conclusion is particular. Then number 8 is if it's about the particular premises, also nothing follows. 2 negative premises, nothing follows. 2 particular premises, nothing follows. One premise is particular, then the conclusion must be particular. Why? Because the conclusion takes the weaker side all the time. Okay? So this is the end of the rules on categorical syllogism. Thank you.